Welcome for everyone tuning in. My name is Jamie Dufek, and I am our event partnership director at NCSA. I've been with NCSA, it's actually 8 years now. So I am super excited to jump on. If you guys haven't had a chance to jump on a Facebook Live segment with me before, I have a really exciting guest tonight. I have Tom Ehlers from Method Test Prep. And what we're going to be talking about tonight are strategies for achieving success when it comes to the SAT and ACT. And so I'm sure I've got some parents on tonight. I'm sure I've got some athletes on tonight. This is a hot topic right now. The SAT and ACT is very critical. There's a lot of questions surrounding this topic. So I'm excited to just kind of dive in. And what I want to do, Tom, is kind of turn it over to you to tell the group a little bit about yourself tonight. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I grew up right here on Long Island. I went to Princeton University, did the Princeton teacher preparation program, and I came back to Long Island. My parents spent their whole careers as gym teachers at a local public high school here on Long Island. And they said to me, when I got back from college, they said, you know, Tom, we have a lot of athletes here who are struggling on the SAT and ACT. Maybe you could help them. And so I literally started working with these high school athletes back in 1998, and it was very gratifying because these were students who were going into the SAT and ACT. They really didn't have any tricks or strategies or techniques. They had no idea about the timing of the exams. They really didn't even know what they were going to be tested on. So they were really starting from scratch. And so I would teach them a few things, and at the end of the hour, the student would say, "Thank you so much." The parent would say, "Thank you." The parent would then say, "Would you like a chicken cutlet Parmesan hero?"
And your answer was yes, right? You always say yes.
I was like, "Bring it out. I'll stay an extra hour." And then, then they started saying, "Would you like some warm chocolate chip cookies?" And once I heard that, I said, "That's it. I'm going to do this all day, every day. I'm going to earn as many chocolate chip cookies as possible." And I just loved it. It was so satisfying, just hour after hour, feeling like you were making a difference. And the students were scoring higher on the exams. They were just feeling so much better about themselves. They were getting into different colleges. So from there, our organization grew. We have a self-paced program that students can use, a checklist for them to follow. So that's just a little bit about my background and kind of where I started.
So for those that maybe aren't aware, at NCSA, Method Test Prep is one of our greatest partners, in my opinion. Just I've worked very closely with you, Tom, in the past, and from someone that's a former Division I student athlete, the SAT and ACT was very challenging for me. So I had been through it, I had done it. I know it's not an easy topic for a lot of athletes and parents, that are currently going through their recruiting process right now. And I just have such a great appreciation for everything that Method Test Prep does, and just the success rate, student athletes and families that use your services. But as the founder and CEO, can you tell us a little bit about, just how long Method Test Prep's been around? I know we don't have to get into the thick of it, but for those that maybe aren't aware of, who Method Test Prep is, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we've been around for 22 years, and we've worked with thousands and thousands of students, thousands of athletes. We have 1,500 schools around the country that use our software. But the mission is, it starts from a couple places. One is, so many students will say things to us like, "I'm a bad test taker." And I just want to scream, like, you're not a bad test taker. No one's taught you anything about this test. So there's such anxiety, there's such a lack of confidence, and so for us, we believe every student should have access to the same high quality test prep. And that's why many of the options that we provide are very good values. They're lower cost than some of the other options out there. And we're fulfilling that in a lot of ways. We have obviously the partnership with NCSA, where every all-in award person at NCSA has access to our program, no cost. So we do a lot. We teach a lot of classes online, live online. We do a lot of private tutoring online. Been around for 20 years, and it's just and it's grown every year. And those are some of the places that we come from.
Awesome. So I'm really excited to kind of dig deep into some, tips and tricks and, fast facts surrounding the SAT and ACT. But before we jump right in, you have personal experience in taking the SAT. I know I want you to talk a little bit about that and tell our listeners tonight about an old guy taking the SAT. So tell us a little bit about that experience. How long ago was it? Just before, we kind of get into tonight's topic.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I said to my wife, I really have to take this test again. And so people say, how did you take the SAT? And I say, anybody can, as long as you pay the fee, you can take the test. I showed up at my alma mater. I still knew some of the custodians. They were looking at me like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm taking the SAT. And a couple of things that were interesting. I brought the method test prep review packets with me. They make you sit in the auditorium for about an hour before you go into the test. So I was just sitting there memorizing the information. These tests are so repetitive. So there are simple things students can do to have a massive advantage. But my blood pressure was up, my heart was racing. And it was a great reminder for me. And obviously being an educator and helping students, you have to kind of go through that experience again to remind yourself when the scores came back, my heart was racing. My wife was like, what's the matter with you? You are such a nerd, She's like, we got two little kids here. Like, what do you care you got in the SAT? I'm like, you don't understand. I have to know, what I got. And I know everyone's wondering. So I will tell you that I was relieved that I scored well. I was able to get all the reading questions correct, but I missed one math question and I omitted one. And I ordered the service where you can see which one, see the question. And as soon as that came home, I looked at those two math questions and I was able to figure them out pretty easily. And it was a reminder to me that for a lot of students, it's not that the material is that difficult, it's the timing aspect.
Yeah,
right?
Great point.
When the teacher says there's 5 minutes left, I mean, literally smoke starts coming out of your ears, and so you get a little discombobulated. And of course, people say to me, well, Tom, what can students take away from that experience? And of course, it's just a little bit of preparation goes a long way, right? So I'm not asking you to spend 4 hours a day. If you put in an hour, 2 hours a week, 2.5 hours a week for a few weeks, that will make a massive difference on your score, right? So just a small amount of preparation will lower your anxiety level a great deal, because even though my blood pressure was up, I was getting a lot of questions correct because I knew exactly what to expect. I knew exactly what was going to be on the test. So that of course gave me a big advantage.
So at 30 years old, you would scold me because I still tell people to this day that I am not a good test taker. I had a lot of anxiety when it came to taking the ACT, and I took it a few different times actually. And I'm sweating right now just thinking back on my experience, years ago. So I get it, and I commend you. Like, you couldn't pay me enough money right now to go back to, my alma mater and, take the test all over again. I was a one and done, experience and over. But we've talked a lot in the past about, being intentional and goal setting. And so for our families that are listening tonight, what really is the goal of taking the SAT and ACT? And especially, when it comes to applying, scores, what advice do you have them when it comes to that goal setting and being an intentional thoughts?
Yeah, so it's one of the best returns on your investment as far as your time. Yeah, you put in a few hours a week, again, 2.5 hours a week, let's say the 8 to 10 weeks leading up to your exam. If you score higher on the SAT and ACT, you will get accepted to more colleges. You will earn often thousands more in an academic merit aid package. And it's interesting, Jamie, because when I do a presentation, either in person or or online, and I say, how many of you know that if you score higher on the SAT or ACT, you will get accepted to more colleges? And most hands go up, which is to be expected. Most people are aware of that. But then I say, how many of you know if you score higher on the SAT or ACT, you will earn a larger academic merit aid package? And only about 40% of the hands will typically go up. And that shocks me because I just think that that's something that everyone knows. So we see it all the time. A college will say, if you score 50 points higher on the SAT or ACT, you will get an extra $2,000 or $3,000 a year. And for student athletes, there's an added sort of incentive or goal here, and that is, of course, you're more attractive to college coaches if you have a higher academic profile, right? So often there are few athletes, their ability level is similar. If one of those athletes has a higher academic profile, higher SAT, ACT scores, then of course that student athlete's more appealing to college coaches. So as much as people don't like the SAT or ACT, or as much as there's some all the negative feelings, the reality is that these tests are still important. They test skills that kids need to know anyway. So the goal here tonight, it couldn't be more important as far as taking that step from high school to college.
Yeah, and I think one question that constantly comes up, Tom, in dealing with families and athletes is, we've heard the term test optional, right? And there are a lot of colleges that are moving towards a test optional opportunity. Can you shed some light on really kind of what test optional means, and really still also how that kind of applies, to the traditional student athlete that's looking to compete at the college level?
Sure, yeah. So there's test optional and there's test blind, right? Test optional is you're not required to submit scores. But of course, if you do submit a score and it's a strong score, then that's going to give you an advantage. The test blind is, we're not even going to look at the scores, right? And so for the class of 2021, rising seniors, many schools have gone test optional. Some schools have gone test blind, but the vast majority of schools are either still requiring the SAT or ACT, or it's test optional, where it's still going to give you an advantage. In addition, some schools that have gone test optional or even test blind have very explicitly stated that to qualify for certain scholarships, you need to submit an SAT or ACT score, right? So you may not need the score to gain admission, but you need the score to qualify for certain scholarships. And then, of course, for athletes, there are still the NCAA requirements, which I like to look at that as a positive, because if you have a lower GPA, by scoring higher on the SAT or ACT, you can make up for that lower GPA and become eligible to compete. So, and I mean, not to get too long-winded, but there's also course placement. So if you score high enough on the SAT or ACT, then you can place out of some of those remedial courses. We hear stories all the time where a student goes to college, but then on placement tests scores low and has to take remedial classes. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, even if it's a full scholarship student, the family still has to pay out of pocket for those remedial courses. Just kind of the reasons why the SAT and ACT are still important.
That's a really great point. And I think one thing to really remind families is that there are still requirements per the NCAA, and the NAI levels and such. While schools still have test optional, as an option, there are still requirements in particular. And Jim, if you could do us a favor, just go ahead and bring up the sliding scale for the Division I level, so that we can kind of give our families a little bit of a visual, on some of the requirements. So there are some GPA requirements, but as Jim just pulled up here, this is kind of what Tom was referring to on the sliding scale. So again, the higher that GPA is, and again, this is just for the Division I level, the lower you need on that SAT or ACT. So for anyone that's been on a Facebook Live with me before, or used to work with me, when I was a softball recruiting coach, I've always preached academics. Because it is your ticket to financial opportunities. It's your ticket, to success. Coaches don't want to worry about students in the classroom. And this is the proof in the pudding. You're kind of rewarded for that better GPA. Jim, if you could slide over to the second slide with the D2 scale, just want to show that as well and the difference there. So for those that maybe weren't aware, there are two different sliding scales for the Division I and the Division II level, but that is actually what Tom was referring to, when he was kind of talking through some of the different requirements and such. And just a friendly reminder for any of those that have questions, type them in the chat box. We'll address them. If something's, pertinent right now, we'll address it at the moment. If not, we'll definitely address it at the Q&A at the end as well, too. But we kind of think about, the SAT and ACT, Tom, and, two different segments, right? You have your group of seniors, and then you have your group of juniors. So while we kind of talk through, our seniors right now, if I'm a parent listening in, what would I have to do if I had a rising senior? What are some action items? What are some things that rising seniors should be focusing in right now, both COVID and COVID aside? What would you recommend?
So the good news is it's very straightforward, and that is to take the SAT and ACT as soon as possible. Now, I know that's a frustrating statement because we work with many rising seniors who were registered for the March or the April or the May, and they keep getting it canceled and pushed back. But at some point, these tests are going to happen. There's an ACT this Saturday, then there's an SAT at the end of August. And the good news is both the College Board and the ACT have added many test dates this fall. So there are many test dates this fall on both the SAT and the ACT. So the simple, and thanks, Jim, for pulling that up. So the short answer is you want to take the test as soon as possible. You want to take one of the exams twice if possible, because most students score higher the second time. Also, you can mix and match your scores. That's called super scoring. You can do that on either test. So of course you give yourself an advantage by taking a test a second time. You don't necessarily need to take both tests twice, but so yeah, straightforward answer. And the good news is, so the main question that we get, Jamie, is, am I behind the 8 ball right now? If I'm going into my senior year and I haven't taken the SAT or ACT, and I haven't even really started preparing, am I behind the 8 ball? And the answer is, you're not too late. If you started prepping tomorrow or Monday, you can be 100% prepared for the August SAT, for the September SAT, September ACT. So there's still plenty of time, and I would just urge the rising seniors and their parents, take advantage of this summer. The fact that there are so many things canceled, and it's a great opportunity to just to be efficient. And of course, you always remember things a little better when you've done it recently, right? So packing in your prep now over the next month and a half, you can give yourself a massive advantage.
Yeah, I love it. One question that I've gotten before too, Tom, and I don't know if you plan on addressing this, later on in the segment, but, when I was kind of growing up, I was instructed to kind of take that test blindly, the first go around, and then do some test prep, afterwards. In your experience, what are your recommendations as these student athletes are, kind of preparing? What is kind of the, optimal structure as they're just kind of starting out in this process?
No, and it's a great question, Jamie. And it's also a question that's for the rising juniors right now, rising sophomores if you're on. It's not a good strategy to take the test cold. And the reason why is when you take test cold and you score lower than maybe you were hoping, it's very demoralizing. And it doesn't matter if in the back of your head, you're like, well, I didn't prepare. You still see that number, right? It's a cold, hard number. So I urge everybody to do some prep, because the same student that might have only scored a 21 on the ACT, with just a little bit of prep, that student might score a 24. And now that student has a completely different mindset, because they're thinking, what, I got a 24 right out of the gate. I can get a 27 or a 28. Whereas that same student, if they scored a 21 the first time, oh man, a 21, that's so much lower than I thought. Oh, I guess I'm bad at this. Maybe I'll just shoot for a 23 or a 24.
That might be my experience that you are describing to a T, unfortunately. So I'm one that has lived and learned.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And so again, and we'll get into juniors in a second, but for everybody on this call, don't take the test cold, do a little bit of prep. One thing I should have mentioned for just to wrap up seniors, don't ever think it's your last chance. Colleges are willing to accept a score from November, from December. There's even talk that there's going to be a January SAT. They'll accept those scores. A February ACT. I never want a kid to think, God, this is my last chance. You could always take the test again, and that obviously reduces some of the pressure.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Any recommendations or anything that maybe we haven't hit on for the junior class, since we've kind of talked through the senior class?
Yeah, just real quick on juniors, there are certain SATs and ACTs where you can pay an extra $20. They will send the entire test back to you. On the SAT, and jot this down if you have a piece of paper. On the SAT, it's called the Question and Answer Service. On the ACT, it's called the Test Information Release Service, TIR. And you check the box when you're registering. It's only offered on certain exams. But I tell it's tragic to me, Jamie, because 99% of families I talk to, they're not aware of these services. So I tell people, think of it like this. Imagine taking a 4-hour exam, getting a score you're not completely satisfied with. No one tells you what you did wrong. And then somebody says, take the exam again, right? That's absurd. If somebody told me that, I'd say, well, I'm going to take it again. I don't know what I did wrong the first time. So it's the October SAT. It's the December ACT. So if a family of a junior is looking for a timeline, a plan, which I know many families are, the timeline is take that October SAT, take the December ACT. And my son and daughter, they're going into 6th grade. No, I have not started test prep with them yet. I'm going to start that next year. Just kidding. But when my son and my daughter are in 11th grade, they're going to be taking those. And I'm going to say to them, you're not taking those exams because it's going to be your best score. You're taking those exams so we can see what you're doing wrong. And then, for example, the March or May SAT, the April or June ACT, those are tests where you can use your mistakes, learn from your mistakes, and score higher.
Yeah, and I think that brings up another really great question where we talked about, increasing scores and things like that. So, one question that we've talked about before is if a student gets just one more question correct on the SAT, how many points does his or her score often go up? Can you shed some light on that for our families?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Jamie, because one additional question means you're going to get 10 more points on your score. So think about that for a second. If you get 5 more math, 5 more grammar, and 5 more reading questions, that's a 150-point improvement on your SAT score. I'm very passionate that every single student can do that because I've seen it hundreds of times. So when I share that with students, you can just see their entire attitude change, their mindset change. They become more optimistic. They become more motivated. They become more confident that, man, I just get a few more questions correct, and that can make a big difference. And the news on the ACT is just as good. If you get just one more question right on the ACT English, that could be a 1-point improvement on that part of your ACT score. So 4 more ACT English, 4 math, 4 reading, 4 science, that's a 4-point improvement on your score. So I often joke that the SAT and ACT, it's like the Wizard of Oz. It's this big black curtain. Nobody knows what's behind it, right? They get a score. They have no idea what the heck that means. Well, if we pull back the curtain and we realize it's just a little old man spitting out the same questions over and over again, and if you get a few of them right, your score is going to be a lot higher.
Yeah, it's a really great point. On the flip side, Tom, if a student athlete gets a question wrong on the SAT or ACT, how many points do they potentially lose?
Yeah, so the answer is 0. And so this is such an important point. There's no penalty for wrong answers, so you must answer every question. If you don't, you're at a massive disadvantage. And people say to me, well, how could that really make a big difference? Consider this, on the ACT English section, they only give you 45 minutes to answer 75 questions, right? And people are shocked when they hear that. And so, how are you supposed to do that? It's difficult to finish 75 questions in 45 minutes, but it's not impossible. But let's just say you're working quickly, and in 44 minutes, you get through 65 questions, which is you're working pretty fast. And the prompter says there's 1 minute left. You have to take a deep breath, and you have to answer, just put down B, 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 C, 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 C. It doesn't matter what you put down. There are only 4 answer choices. So mathematically, you're going to get 2.5 more questions correct just from randomly guessing. You might get lucky and get 3 more or 4 more, right? So that could be a 3 or 4 point increase in your score just from blindly guessing. So I feel it's my job every time I do a webinar like this, just remind students and parents to answer every question on both exams.
Do you recommend student athletes kind of going in with a plan? Like, if the timing, does kind of pass, to kind of come up with that plan at the beginning and say, I'm going to stick with A, I'm going to go in and I'm going to stick with, C, whatever it may be. What's kind of your thought process when it comes to that?
Good question. So on the ACT, you get less time per question. So you have to go with your first instinct and then just move on, right?
Yeah.
Many of you were probably taught, same as my parents taught me, if they give you 6 hours for a test, take all 6 hours. Double check everything, triple check everything. You can't operate that way, certainly on the ACT and really not even on the SAT. The good news is the questions on the ACT are pretty straightforward. So you can move through them quickly, but there is just no time to second guess. There's no time to double check. Yeah, and you can't lose your concentration. So obvious thing, you have to get a good night's sleep. You have to eat a hearty breakfast. Bring water with you, bring snacks. I know these things sound so obvious, Jamie, but of course, so many students don't do these things, and it makes a big difference. These tests are tests of stamina and endurance. Just like an athletic event, you have to be mentally and physically prepared.
That's such a great point. And I think so many families and athletes forget, sometimes, and I know that a lot of us have a lot going on. I remember taking my ACT the next morning after a big softball game I had the night before. I probably was not, mentally prepared as I should have been. So really great points on that. And I want to get into some fast facts when it comes to national averages. I feel like this is something that families are always curious about. What's a good score? What's a bad score, when it comes to the SAT and ACT? So can you shed some light on that, Tom?
Yeah, so the national average on the ACT is a 21. The national average on the SAT is a 1070. And families are typically surprised by that because everyone talks about those top scores. And when people say, what's a good score? Of course, good is a relative term. And so I say, Google some of the colleges you're interested in, average SAT scores at blank, and then whatever those averages are, of course, you want to score higher than that. But I think that a lot of students have these unrealistic expectations at first, right? So everybody wants to get over a 30 on the ACT, and the student will get like a 26 or a 27 and be really disappointed. And I think that's a shame because a 26 or a 27 is way above average.
Yeah.
And that's an excellent score. It's something to be proud of. Now, of course, there are students on right now who are saying, well, I have higher goals than that. I think that's great. And I bet you can reach those higher goals. But understand that a 26 or 27 is an excellent score. And look, a 21 will get you into plenty of colleges and will allow you to compete at many, many schools and universities. So, and for the SAT, same thing. So, those are just kind of the fast facts there.
Yeah, I love the point that you just made about, doing your research ahead of time. I know one thing that we really preach at NCSA is making sure that you are doing the legwork prior, to reaching out schools and, things along those lines, and really doing the research ahead of time. So for those that maybe aren't familiar of looking at the academic requirements of schools, that information is so readily available on the school's website. You can look at the academic information literally on most academic tabs, that the school offers. So I think doing that legwork ahead of time really can also shape your realistic expectations when it comes to your goal setting, for scores as well too. So really awesome points on that. Something else I want you to touch on, Tom, is excluding the optional essay section. How many sections are there for both the SAT and ACT? Can you talk a little bit about that so families have an understanding?
Yeah, so it's very interesting and important, Jamie, that so there are 4 sections on the SAT and there are 4 sections on the ACT, putting aside the optional essay for a second. But even though there are the same number of sections on the 2 exams, on the SAT, 2 of the 4 sections are math. On the ACT, only 1 of the 4 sections is a math section. So obviously that's a big difference percentage-wise. So if a student is stronger in math than they are in English, they may feel more comfortable and score higher on the SAT because 50% of their grade is going to come down to their math score and how they score on the math sections. On the ACT, 75% of your score comes down to your verbal ability. And again, I think that's a really important point for everybody to understand. If you're a pretty strong English verbal student, I want you to go into the ACT with a chip on your shoulder. And here's why. You have the ACT English section, where they're essentially testing you on the same 11 grammar rules over and over again. So you can do really well in that section. You can memorize those rules, be prepared for them, score high. Then you have the ACT reading section. They give you all the answers in the passages. Now you have to learn to be fast as you go back and look through the passages, but the answers are there. So you can score very well on that section. And then there's the ACT Science, which is really sort of a misnomer. It's not a science section, it's a reading comprehension section. They give you a chart or a table or a graph, a couple of paragraphs, and you have to pull information out of what they give you. So once we explain and teach students that it's really an English section, it changes people's attitude. So fully 3 of the 4 sections are reading comprehension and English sections. And that's why I want kids who feel strong in English to go into the ACT with a lot of confidence and, like I said, a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah. Before we get into kind of some next steps, and obviously, some offerings, that Method Test Prep has for SAT and ACT, I would love for you to also address just what College Board has asked of colleges, especially given the COVID situation, some test dates that have been canceled, and such. In your experience, what has College Board kind of asked of different colleges when it comes to the acceptance of scores or, considerations? Can you talk a little bit about that too?
Yep. Yeah. So number one, they've asked colleges to accept scores later. And thank you for the visual. So they've asked colleges to allow students to take the test later in the year, which we kind of touched on earlier. They've asked colleges to consider students who have not been able to take the SAT or ACT because of a specific geographic area that they're in, for example. And then also just recognizing that many students are only going to have the chance to take the SAT or ACT once. And again, a lot of students will score higher if they have a chance to take it again. So I think it's great. I think it's important on the College Board and the ACT's part to encourage colleges to be more flexible this year for the class of 2021.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of families' frustrations is just the unknown, of kind of the cancellations. And again, as you've acknowledged before, are we behind the 8 ball? So it's good to know that College Board and other groups are advocates, what I mean, for the student athletes that have kind of lost out on some of these opportunities. So
yeah.
Thanks for shedding some light on that. Definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, and Jim, just very quickly, like the thing about these tests, they test skills that students need to know to be successful in high school and college and beyond. So I know it's so frustrating to put in a bunch of hours and then have your test canceled, but to become a better reader, to get stronger at reading comprehension, to have a better understanding of basic grammar, to have an understanding of basic math concepts. These are skills that are going to serve you well for the rest of your life. And it's one of the things I'm so passionate about. What I enjoy about my job is I'm not just teaching students to beat a test or score higher on one test. I'm teaching them things that they need to know anyway. So I know that probably is small consolation to students who just keep having their tests canceled, but it's worth your time to prepare for these exams, and you will ultimately get to take the test and you'll prove that you've learned a ton. But these are skills you need to know.
I have such a great appreciation for the way that you've just framed that. I think it's so easy to be a student athlete that's frustrated, especially with the timing of everything. But the fact that, you've kind of taken it, full 180, and putting a positive spin on it of now more than ever, you have more time to prepare and even be more equally prepared, going into those test opportunities over the next few months, I think is such a great way to look at it. And so I appreciate you, for shedding some light on that. But I want to take a brief pause, before we kind of go ahead and highlight a few things and some next steps, with Method Test Prep if you want more information. But I do want to acknowledge the fact that academics is such a large part of the recruiting process. But again, it is only a fraction of the recruiting process. So for those that are on tonight's segment, of Facebook Live and are unsure or think they're behind, the 8 ball in their recruiting process or have questions, on the recruiting process, I do encourage you guys to update your information for college coaches, and you can do that on the pinned comment by filling out that form. Also, if you have more information on Method or want more information on Method Test Prep, you can also fill that out, and we'll have Tom's team follow up with you guys as well. I've personally seen the success opportunities that student athletes have had in working with Method Test Prep. And I know that's why, we as NCSA are partnered with such a great organization. So, I'm really excited to have you on, Tom, and to also kind of turn it over to you, to talk a little bit for a few minutes before we turn it over to questions on just some next steps with Method Test Prep. But before I do that, I also want to give a huge shout out to USATF. If I've got any USATF listeners on, they actually were the ones that really encouraged us to jump on Facebook Live today rather than just a traditional, webinar, to provide these fast facts, around a really important topic. So just wanted to give the USATF group a big shout out as well too. But again, on the slide here, you guys can see on the pinned comment, go ahead and complete that form so that we can, go ahead and update your information for college coaches as well. But Jim, if you want to go ahead and just pull up a few visuals, and Tom, I'll turn it over to you if you want to kind of talk through just a few things that Method Test Prep offers before we open it up for a Q&A.
Yeah, so when I share a bunch of information, Jamie, families say, okay, I feel more prepared, I feel more informed, my anxiety level's a little lower, but what do I do next? And so about 15 years ago, parents and students said to us, just create a checklist so students can follow a simple checklist, a series of 15-minute exercises. And so that's what we did. Every year we improved the checklist. So for NCSA MVP members, the program is included in their MVP membership. Also, as I mentioned earlier, for all-in award families with NCSA, this program is included. But for all other families, the value is tremendous. It's normally $149, but for anybody on this Facebook Live event, for tonight, it's $99, so it's an additional $50 off. The coupon code, if anybody's interested, wants to jot it down, it's just the word special and then 99, and no spaces, all lowercase. So for $99, when a family pays that fee, they have access from now through graduation. So and so it's a series of tasks. And Jim, if you wouldn't mind the next slide after the one we were on, just so people can see a visual. Yeah, so this is what the home screen looks like. And again, the feedback from students and parents was just make it as straightforward as possible, follow a checklist. Students who follow this checklist improve their scores, an average of 150 points on the SAT, 3 points on the ACT. We have thousands of students using this program every week. So we get a lot of data, we get a lot of feedback. We know the checklist is highly effective, we know it works, and we know we're being realistic, right? I'm not asking a student to move mountains. I'm not asking them to do 5 hours a day. Sit down and knock out a 15-minute exercise, get a check mark. The reason why the checklist is so effective is it's full of audio and video. And so again, if you wouldn't, yeah, thank you. So here's a sample or a typical lesson. Every lesson has an audio component, and it's not a robotic voice or an actor, it's a teacher. Somebody who's explained that particular concept hundreds of times. So students are listening to the teacher while they're following along with the text. And then, Jim, go ahead to the next slide. Then, of course, you can practice on what you just learned, and you get immediate feedback, which, of course, we all want these days. You try something, you're told if you're right or wrong, the correct answer, and the answer you submitted, and then you're giving a variety of explanations, most importantly, a video explanation. So just on the next slide, so you can watch the teacher walking you through how to solve that type of question. Not only that question, but here are the underlying strategies. Here's the underlying concept. This is why the checklist is so effective. And most of us want to work at our own pace. Most of us want to work at times that are good for us. You see here that we have an evaluation as part of the program, so you can get a quick sense of where you stand on both the SAT and the ACT. We also have full-length exams as part of the program. You can take a full-length test, 2 full-length SATs, 2 full-length ACTs, and then we have a vocabulary builder section. Every student I've ever worked with has said to me, I know I need to improve my vocabulary. Can you give me an easy tool for doing so? And this is a tool where you can just quiz yourself on words, and then the program's keeping track of which words you've missed, which words you've mastered.
That's awesome.
And so all of that is $99 for families who sign up tonight. Use the coupon code SPECIAL99. Yeah, so it's like having a tutor 24/7, and it's broken down into really manageable chunks.
So awesome. And I think too, like I've personally had a lot of questions from families of, how can I spend time filling up the day, for my student athlete, especially since most of them had not finished, their school year in the classroom, and it kind of finished it virtually. So really great options. And I love the fact that you can, kind of do things at your own pace. So thanks for sharing some of that info. But I do want to go ahead and kind of open it up for some Q&A for the next few minutes here. So feel free again, guys, go ahead and use that chat box to go ahead and send us some questions. But Duncan Watson asked, how do marks get forwarded to schools? Can you explain that process?
Yeah, it's actually a great question because when you register for the SAT or ACT, you can have the scores automatically sent to schools, but the vast majority of people choose not to take that option because they want to wait until they get their best scores they're happy with. And then, of course, it's an extra fee, which is frustrating, but in the grand scheme of things, that's the smart move. So then once you're happy with your scores, you submit the scores that you want to colleges. So it's a very important question, Duncan, and I would also strongly encourage people, reach out to their school's counseling office. The counselors have a wealth of information. Sometimes you just need to reach out to them for some of the details around that. Great question.
Yeah. There's another question that popped up too from Amy. How long will the code be good for? She's curious.
Yeah, so that code is good for tonight. And again, if you don't sign up tonight, it's still a great value. It's $149 and you have access through graduation. So if you're on right now, you're a 10th grader, parent of a 10th grader, you'll have access, for the next 2.5 years.
That's a really great point, Tom. And just thinking back on my own experience, and again, this was years ago. So what does a typical SAT or ACT kind of book cost nowadays? I think it's a great comparison, to kind of what you guys offer online. What would kind of a standard, test prep book, run families? Because some families may not know or, may not have a baseline to work off of as well, too.
Yeah, and you're gonna date me here, Jamie, because this is the really only thing I could use. So a book these days anywhere from $25 to $45, and look, a book was great when that's all we had, but obviously no audio, no video, and some of the frustration with the books are out there. They're thick. Often you can't even find the answer key, so you get frustrated looking around for the answer key. Then you can't really find the explanations. If you do find the explanations, they're written in such a way that only a person who got that question right could understand the explanation, right? So that's not very helpful. What we all want these days, we want video explanations. That's how we all learn most effectively. So yeah, and I really just touched on some of the features. There are other features. Actually, one last thing I should mention, Jamie, those cram packets that I mentioned that I brought with me, the old guy took the SAT. All of those cram packets are in the program. They're located in resource materials. So those packets alone, we've had kids who just memorize those packets and they go up 150 points in the SAT just from memorizing the packets.
Yeah, awesome. Really great point. Kim asked, and I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, but is there any talk of the NCAA waiving the testing requirement for recruitment for the class of 2021?
Not that I've heard so far. Yeah, so it's a great question. Maybe there's talk of it, but I haven't seen an announcement like that.
Yeah, I haven't either on our end. And I'm sure, in the next few months, there may be some more information, centered around that. So, I do encourage you guys to stay tuned. I would also say too, for those that maybe don't follow SAT or ACT online, Twitter's a really great resource because they're constantly posting out updates and things as well too with test dates and, other information outside of just, following method test prep. I follow Method Test Prep on Twitter, and there's a lot of great info that I've seen, recently. So just a lot of wealth of knowledge, online and just on some different social media channels that are free too for you guys. And actually one thing, Tom, that I did want to ask, so for those that, maybe didn't want to take advantage of the special tonight, obviously, I do encourage you guys to fill out that form if you want more information on Method Test Prep, and Tom, and his team can follow up with you guys. But Tom, do you guys offer free opportunities on your site, or what kind of tools might be available to a student athlete that maybe didn't want to go ahead and jump into, kind of a service with you guys?
Yeah, so we have a number of free resources. So we have a YouTube channel, simple to find, Method Test Prep YouTube channel, and we taught a free SAT class every day. I believe it was in the month of April. So all told, there are a lot of hours of free video there. We also have a resources section. So, and thanks for sharing this slide on the Method Test Prep webpage. And if you go there, it's easy to navigate. There's a section called resources. There's a whole series of free resources. And I'm glad you brought it up, Jamie, because when I shared earlier that our mission is to level the playing field, and we have leveled the playing field for many, many students, every day we teach a class at 1 p.m. Eastern, and it's a $10 class. And it's a 30-minute class, which students love because they're not giving up their entire day.
I'm not committed to the whole afternoon. It's 30 minutes of my time. That's beautiful.
And hopefully they're up by then, which I know on the West Coast is only 10 a.m. But it's a 30-minute class. It's $10. So parents, of course, love the low price point. So if you just go to the Method Test Prep homepage, we call it Test Prep Time, 1 to 1:30 Eastern. We teach a specific topic, and so it's short, it's focused, and again, it's a price point that is reasonable for most families to at least give a shot. And if the student finds it very valuable, which you brought it up earlier, Jamie, kids struggled a lot this spring. Many parents feel like the kids have fallen behind a little bit. These are all academic topics, right? They're math topics, they're English topics. They're things that students need to know regardless of the SAT and ACT. So it's a way to, to learn a little bit this summer. And again, not take up the whole day.
Yeah, I love it. For my parents listening, I'm sure you guys will love it too. It keeps your student athletes active. Got to keep that mind fresh. But I think that might be all the questions we have right now. But I'm so appreciative, Tom, of your time tonight. You're my SAT, ACT guru, and I know this is always not a fun topic for everyone, but hopefully everyone took away some fast facts and tips, centered around the SAT and ACT tonight. Again, if you guys want more information on Method Test Prep, go ahead and fill out that form and we'll follow up with you guys. Or if you want more information on NCSA, same thing there as well. But before we turn you loose, Tom, any last remarks for our families listening in tonight?
Yeah, I would just say that, again, students can be successful on these exams, right? So for years, there were these myths and misconceptions that these were IQ tests. And these are not IQ tests. These are tests of how well you've studied what's on the test, right? So these are tests that you can prepare for. I can't tell you, Jamie, how many student athletes I've worked with. They have had such a feeling of pride when they've raised their score. And it could be from a 900 to an 1,000 or 910 to a 1050, which is a great accomplishment. I'm not saying that a student has to score a 1,600 to feel, but it's like, wow, it's something I accomplished academically. And it's, of course, a great life lesson that if you roll up your sleeves and work hard, it will make a difference, even on something important. So I would just encourage people, don't treat this thing like it's a monster that can't be beat. These are predictable, repetitive tests that you can prepare for and you can improve on. So yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody's time, and yeah, I wish everyone good luck.
Thank you. And again, thanks everyone. We've got the info up there if you guys have questions on Method Test Prep. And again, thank you to USATF for pushing the envelope here and getting us outside our comfort zone on Facebook Live. We appreciate you all, and I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of the week. Bye, everyone.